Welcome to our cyber sesh on trial and error.
Get your overalls and shovels ready. No pitchforks, please.
We're going to dig into de-thinking.
Hi, I'm Katie Roy, and I'm a U.S. history teacher at South-Doyle, and I'm dipping my toe in STEM this year.
And I'm Katie DeVinney, and I am called the STEM czar at our school. I teach the STEM and the technology classes, and I am one of the robotics mentors for the robotics team here. So let me talk to you a little bit about what STEM looks like here at South-Doyle High School. If you see in one of these pictures is a picture of our robotics team. As I mentioned earlier, I am one of the robotics mentors on the team. I don't know if you can notice anything in that picture, but there currently are 0 female members of our robotics team. And there isn't much diversity on the team as well. So our school, what's great about South-Doyle is that it is very diverse. We have all walks of life coming to school here. Robotics is just one portion of STEM. And the reason why we're trying to do STEM here is that we want all of our students to be able to be engaged in STEM and to have the same opportunities no matter where they come from and what neighborhood they come from.
All right, so one big focus you need to have is the goals. SMART goals are excellent functions to start off your defining and your ideating. A SMART goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. We actually had someone come in for our SMART goals. Miss Laura Denton, a community partner, came to teach our students how to make these and set them up for their grant proposals. As you can see, I have a student example on the board, and she has defined each one as well as made a little picture to help her remember what each one stands for. By the end of this presentation, our SMART goal for you is that you will be able to understand the de-thinking process and its STEM applications at SDHS South-Doyle High School. So I want to keep this interactive. As we go through the slides, answer the questions on the survey, and you can go ahead and answer the first question when you find it. At the QR code, as well as the link here, you can go to our website that has tons of resources for you to use after you leave our session today. So our experience, there's a reason it's called Trowel and Error. There was a lot of trial and error in learning and implementing the de-thinking process in our community. We were trying to put together a community garden PBL with not a really good end goal in mind. All we knew was we want plants and we want our community to access them. We actually started off by having the PBL focused on the old greenhouse on campus, which is actually supposed to be torn down. So that didn't really work out for us. We've gone through multiple rounds and we've finally found our footing, but the only way we found that was through failing. So, as you'll see in the video, just keep swimming.
Hey, Mr. Grumpy Gills. When life gets you down, you know what you gotta do?
I don't want to know what you gotta do.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim.
Dorino singing.
I love to swim in.
Dory.
When you want to swim, you want
See,
to
I'm gonna get stuck now with that song. Now it's in my head.
Sorry.
If you are not familiar with the de-thinking process, I'm just going to walk you through that really quick right now. This here is what we call the SD thinking process because we are South-Doyle. The first step of the de-thinking process is to start with empathy, and that's just really getting to know who your customer is and what do they really need. At this step of the phase, we like to just say, ask why, and just keep asking why so that you could dig deeper. The next phase is, once you know and understand your customer, is that you're trying to define what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And again, if you don't know your customer, then you don't know what the actual problem is. After you define your problem, you then want to ideate or think of as many potential solutions to that problem. And for me, in my classes, I like to say the dumbest idea is probably the best idea. So at this point, don't be scared to let the students just shout out as many possible ideas as they can. Once they ideate, and then pick one of those ideas that they think might be promising, and they develop a prototype. And so, in an engineering class, a prototype is going to sometimes be a physical model or maybe a computer model. In this session, in the greenhouse model, it was, a rough draft of their final presentation. Or later on, you're going to see that we did some physical prototypes as well to maybe potentially get ready for our automated greenhouse. Finally, once you prototype, you then test your prototype to see how it failed. And of course, like we said, failure is good. You want to see failure. If you don't fail, you don't know where success could come from. Finally, once you've done that and you do what's called iteration, and you keep prototyping and testing and learning from your designs, you're ready to present, and then you present your final product to customers or to your community members. So one way that we did empathy with this unit is that we actually showed a few videos to students to get them to learn about what food insecurity is like in other places around the world. We showed 2 different videos throughout the whole year. One of the videos that we showed was called A Place at the Table. This is a very emotional video, and it really hit home for a lot of our kids because our students here, we're a Title I school, we have a lot of students that have food insecurity issues, and they go home and they don't know what they're going to do for food. And so this video follows 4 different families who are food insecure, living in poverty, and just how they have to try to survive to find the next meal. The second video that we showed during the year was called Living on $1, and this is a video about 2 guys who go down into rural Guatemala, and they try to make it a goal of living off of $1 a day for a month there in Guatemala, and just some of the issues that come up with that, and what it's like to be someone who lives in Guatemala all the time, not just for a month. So these are 2 really great movies to get students to really empathize and understand what it's like to actually be food insecure. And then from that, we then created what are called persona templates, which you can see some pictures and examples here of student work. And the point and the goal of the persona template is to get students to empathize with a person and to try to figure out what is their why, into why they're struggling the way they are and why they're trying to succeed in life the way they are.
Another huge implement part of the dethinking process is empathy. Students have to understand whether you're experiencing it yourself or not, you still can care. So we teach our students what empathy is through the use of videos. So we've already talked about a couple movies that we can do, but empathy I taught through the Brene Brown model. So this is a cute little TED Talk where you'll see a bear, a fox, and an antelope interacting, discussing the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich?
After our students interacted with these videos, we had an interactive pear deck for them to work through and actually defining and recapping what empathy was. As you can see, we had a few important questions. What is empathy? How is it different from sympathy? Why do we do this? And how will it help us develop our solution to the greenhouse? Because you know how kids can be. They'll look at you and be like, why am I learning about empathy when I'm trying to build a garden? What does that have to do with it? And this kind of pulls that back in for them.
To define the problem, we did what we call a pro-pro chart. And what a pro-pro chart is, sorry, it's hard to say that really fast, is you take 2 different models and all you do is you find the positives of both of those. And then you look at both positives and you try to find common ground between them to then develop your final model of this is what I want from positives of both of these to be able to create my product and define what my problem is. Okay, so of these 2 pro models, I am showing you, we have a couple videos here that you can watch a little bit of. The first one is looking at food pantries and then students how to analyze positives of a food pantry. And then the second one is looking at community gardens and analyzing positives of a community garden. And then in the next slide here, we're looking at different examples of what student work is. So for this, they looked at positives of a supermarket and positives of a community garden and then came together to create one model to define their problem.
Close your eyes. I invite you to picture a kitchen. Maybe it is your kitchen at home or your dream kitchen that your best friend has. What does it look like? What does it smell like? Now, I invite you to picture another kind of kitchen, a soup kitchen. it's suddenly a different image, right? You can open your eyes. Did it look something like this? If it did, that is okay. It was certainly my idea of a soup kitchen when I grew up volunteering at one as a child. My mom, twin sister, and I would go there often, not because we were food insecure, but because my mom wanted to teach us a thing or two about serving others. We'd drive downtown, walk inside. Nancy, the woman in charge, would give us a couple canned goods to make for lunch that day. At 11, we would serve the food to the line out the door. I grew up serving there. It was in this experience that I began to notice several things, as any child would. One thing that always struck me for strange was, why was I the one serving this food across the line to a kid who looked just like me? We would scoop out whatever we had prepared that day, sometimes chicken, sometimes pork, and serve it, again, to a kid that looked just like me. This was unlike any dining experience that I had as a child. Not even my elementary and middle school cafeterias felt this way. After we served the food, we wouldn't sit and eat. We'd quickly clean up and talk about where we were going to lunch that day. We ended up at my favorite Mexican place a lot. It was sitting there over chips and salsa that I couldn't get the diners at the soup kitchen out of my mind. Something wasn't right. Years went by and I transitioned to college. I started volunteering and eventually working for a day shelter, working with people experiencing homelessness and poverty. It was at this day shelter that I got to know so many incredible people, some of the kindest people I had ever met. I got to know their hopes and their dreams and their stories, and they got to know mine. They even came to my college graduation. So what do you do when you want to get to know your friends more? You eat with them, right? So I found myself back at the soup kitchen. We'd walk about a mile down the road. Once we got there, we'd stand in line outside on a cold or rainy day like today. Once we finally got inside, we'd get handed a plate, and we didn't get to choose what we wanted. Sometimes we did get that chicken or that pork that was served. Then we'd have to search for 2 seats. We probably didn't find them together, and eat really quickly so someone else could come in and eat. Do not hear me say that soup kitchens are wrong. They are incredible. Soup kitchens feed over 300 people in an hour. Without them, we would have a ton of hungry people. But what I found was it was so different than my life experience, where I get to eat wherever I want to eat, whatever I want to eat, and for however long I want to eat. 1 in 7 people are food insecure in our hometown. That is 1 in 7 people in your row in front of you. Think about it that way. 1 in 5 children are hungry. That is not okay. In knowing these numbers and getting to know so many incredible people experiencing poverty, I knew I needed to do something about it. So I began to take people out for meals. And I saw that they wanted to go to buffet restaurants a lot. I had a friend named John. John happened to be experiencing poverty at the time. But 3 months prior to that, John had a killer job and a really nice apartment. His company shut down, and so he couldn't turn his lights got turned off, and then he got evicted. John ended up at the shelter, and then he ended up outside. John and I would eat out often. This day, it was his birthday, so we ended up at his favorite buffet restaurant. It was here I asked John why. I said, John, why do we always come to this buffet restaurant? Because I know it is not because of the chocolate fountain. And he said, Maggie, 2 reasons. The first being, here, I feel seen and heard. Living in poverty, I get treated as invisible a lot. People walk right by me. Here, There are multiple layers of people that greet me, acknowledge me, and see me. And then someone even comes around and asks if I need anything and if I need a refill. I feel seen, heard, and welcome here. The second, John said, was I have choice. Living in poverty means people kind of make the choices for you. Here, I get to choose if I want a salad because I'm feeling healthy, or if I want a waffle, because some days don't we all just want a waffle? I have choice here, Maggie. Mic drop. Powerful stuff, huh? I finally realized that I needed to do something about this. I needed to Soup Kitchen 2.0 this town.
When I first started telling people that the plan was to build community gardens at public schools in the city of New Bedford, some people were skeptical. The teachers at the first school were excited and hopeful, but wondered if families would actually show up to participate. This particular school had extremely low family engagement, and 95% of the student body was living at or below the poverty line. Needless to say, there were obstacles. The teachers and I hosted our first garden planning night on a brisk November evening. We had 15 families show up. This was the most the school had seen attend a single event in years, and the group was diverse. There was one family that stood out in my mind that was there representing 3 generations. The grandmother, who spoke primarily Portuguese, told us all how to make soup out of the tops of beets and radishes. She said nothing should go to waste. Another mother was there with a list of vegetables, too expensive to buy in the grocery store. She told us about her family's favorite dish, stuffed green peppers. That year, we planted an entire row of green peppers. The teachers and I walked away from that night feeling excited and inspired by the cultural knowledge these families brought to the table and the fact that they showed up. Students planted seedlings in their classrooms, and the teachers and I planned another engagement day for the spring. But again, there was a fear not many parents would really show up. Come a sunny Saturday morning in May, the schoolyard was flooded with over 100 family members. What was it about a community garden that moved these parents to show up? Sure, some of them had cultural gardening knowledge that they were eager to put to use, but others had never gardened before. And truth be told, neither had I. I'm a city girl who's been known to kill her houseplants. But maybe people were there for the same reason I love doing the work I do. It builds community. The garden creates a space where people can engage in meaningful and authentic ways, where a parent can participate not in a formal parent-teacher conference, but in real life. As many of us know, urban public schools often have low family engagement. And we also know that family engagement is critical to students feeling engaged and excited about learning. When I was growing up, I attended a public elementary school in Providence, Rhode Island. Both my parents were actively engaged in my education. They attended open houses, parent-teacher conferences, and even chaperoned a few field trips. More power to them. Some things you should know about my parents. They were white, middle class, held 9-to-5 jobs, had graduate degrees, and had reliable transportation. Engaging in the existing structure for family engagement was not only easy, it was as if the system was designed for families that looked like mine, despite the fact that my parents were lesbians. But that's a whole other talk. The point is, because of my parents' race and class, my white middle-class teachers found us easy to connect with. Demographically, New Bedford is home to many Azorian and Cape Verdean families, hence the kale, and a fast-growing Central American population representing countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. What do these dominant cultures of New Bedford have in common? A passion and a skill for growing food.
Once they developed their pro chart, they then looked at an agricultural web quest where they had to look at what can we put in our garden, like what physically can grow here in East Tennessee, and also what could we grow so that we can not have to look after it very much in the summer. things that they had to look for is not just the crops, but also different ways that you can grow crops. So they had to research what's called a sip garden. They also had to look at raised beds and looking at what are called grow bags, where you could take different plants and just put them in bags and move them around based on where the sun is. So in the ideating phase, what we had students do is after they've kind of done some research on what they could maybe have in a garden, they've maybe talked to people to figure out what they want in a garden. We then had students make a ranking and figure out what are all the things that if I had a dream garden, what would I want in it? And they put that list down, they ranked it from most important to least important, and then they did what's called a consensus map, and they compared everybody else's rankings, took the averages of those rankings to then determine what is the most important thing that they want for their garden. We then had them in a shared spreadsheet look at some estimations of costs to figure out if I want these 5 things, how much of those things can I have with a budget of $5,000? And this is it was a really great tool to get them to really think about so much of a garden, what we can have, versus what can we actually obtain with $5,000. And it was a nice lead into what we're doing right now for the final project, where they're actually creating a proposal for a grant that is $5,000. So real life right there. The prototyping phase is the part I think that we probably had the most error and trial with, and we definitely failed a lot with. But I think even still, students came out learning a lot from that. One of the prototypes that we did, we started initially with what was called the buckaroo, which is from Adafruit, and we have links to this in our website with all of the example of the code and with where you could go to buy this. The initial thought, like we said earlier, is that we wanted students to look at the greenhouse and look at how we could restore it, but also how we could automate it so that it's, coming to today's age of everything being automated. So the buckaroo is a really cool tool for that because it's a self-watering plant tool where you just code this microbit and it does everything for you to water the plant based on when it needs water. Once we realized the greenhouse was no longer an option, we then started translating over into looking at the community garden and figuring out where we could put a community garden. So for the second stage, we used the microbits again to define where is the best location for our garden. Our campus is gigantic. It's almost like a college campus. And with that is a lot of grass and a lot of green space. So there are plenty of opportunities for us to put a garden. What students did is they took the microbits. We were able to use the temperature sensor, the light sensor, and the soil sensor to put them in these little boxes that you can see in these pictures here. We put them at different locations around campus, and then students collected data for 3 weeks from the microbits to determine what the average temperature was, what the average light was, and then obviously the soil sensing. And then they read and analyzed that data to determine what they thought was the best location around campus. It was a really cool experiment. One grow with this is that unfortunately this is still in beta mode. When we found out about this, it was like Microbit just released this idea. So not all of the microbits worked, and so we weren't able to collect data at all of our locations. So I would recommend, if you're wanting to do this, maybe contact Microbit, see if the bugs have been worked out. But it was still a really neat experiment.
Round 3 was kind of my baby, honestly. We developed a prototype round focused on creating surveys. So our kids were able to create surveys and actually distribute them to all of their community members and stakeholders, which includes our students, our staff, and actual parents and just community members apart from the school. As you can see, this is one of our posters from our students. They created posters with imagery, descriptions, a QR code with their own survey link, and they were able to get over 300 responses. There were some grows to this. We didn't get a ton of community engagement. I think it came out to about 2% of outside of school engagement, but we did get a few parent answers, and we know from now, next time, just more media and marketing will get us to the point that we need. But there were so many glows in this. Students were really engaged. They had over, like I said, 300 survey responses that they were able to real-time analyze and use that data collection for future use. They also learned real-world skills. These are things that they can use in the future and that they will probably have to know how to use in future careers. It also had excellent interdisciplinary connections, including Our marketing team, marketing teachers, we actually had their senior class come out and teach our kids how to make great survey questions. After that round, we had our grant proposal round, which is currently loading. We're still in the middle of this round of prototype. Our students are actually going to put together their own grant proposal. The pros is that it's not super hands-on. We don't have a lot of technology involved with it, but it is very real-world skills. It also has connected our students to the empathy piece and interdisciplinary connections as well. Again, this time we have a little more specifically with English and writing. They're also practicing research and, again, real-world skills that they'll have to do in the future. So focusing on your future takeaways, focus on your end result. Don't just go straight into STEM, and the STEM part will find its way into your program.
And just like we want our students to use design thinking, we also should be using design thinking as we're doing our process and our planning. So really think about empathizing with our students and with those in the community to think, how can we really help them? Really try to really focus, like Katie said, on defining your end product before you even begin in the rest of the process. And then don't be scared to fail, because failure, as we have learned, leads to success later on. And that's just part of the prototyping and the testing and that iteration process.
I think we've really grown together today.
Herb your enthusiasm there a little bit, Katie.
See you later, buckaroos.